Hi, it's Marisol, your rebel guide to living a life of freedom abroad, bringing you an episode of Roaming the Now, where entrepreneurs, coaches, and mentors come together to give you a behind the scenes look at the real and raw experience of setting out to a new country and building a life and business abroad. Make sure to like and subscribe to Roaming the Now. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to this episode of Roaming the Now. It is truly a reflective day on the podcast, as there's going to be a bit of a role reversal. Today, I am so thrilled to have my friend and mentor, Julia Armet, here to interview me. Julia is a transformational leadership coach for socially conscious professionals. Her company, Higher Playbook, facilitates impact initiatives for the workplace where people are able to deepen their connection to themselves, each other, and their work. Julia's true gift for seeing and reflecting people and her powerful ability to create safe space is why I asked her to be my interviewer. I can say personally, Julia is a virtual mirror that can help you deepen and showcase your self expression in a way that is really, really powerful. So I'm handing this over to you, Julia.
Thank you. I honestly am so proud of your courage to come here today and really speak your truth. So, thank you for asking me to be the interviewer. And really, thank you for having me hold such an intimate space for a conversation that I know a lot of people will benefit from hearing. How are you feeling?
Well, this is definitely a topic I know a lot of people have interest in, and a lot of people have asked me about, and I have shared to the degree that I wanted to share about it, right? And I know that from our conversations, specifically when you were watching me go through this, you had said to me like, when you are ready to share, like you will share. And so now it is time to share. Like, how do you start a new life after a divorce? Like, what does this really look like?
Absolutely. And thank you for really approaching me when the time was right because we've we've been connected now for a few years and I was there in the moment when you made that life altering decision to divorce. And so today's conversation healing through divorce is going to move us through that journey and as I hold the space for you, I want to highlight something. I mentioned courage, and the word courage comes from the Latin root heart. And one of the earliest definitions of courage is to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. So, as you really come from your heart, I want to invite you to be as vulnerable as you choose to be. As I hold this space, I'm curious if there's anything that I can do to really create the safety for you to express yourself.
A great question. I really feel that, just follow my energy, which I know you know how to do. And I would say, and like this is really important for anyone listening, Julia is one of like the people that I really feel seen in my entirety, by, and I have always felt safe with Julia. So I think that that's something that plays a big role in why Julia is here in this like powerful moment to share my story, as well as like speaking from the heart. I feel like one of the first people who really I allowed to see me and actually truly has seen me in my depth and full expression. So I do feel safe with you.
You're such a beautiful person, and you're here right now in a way that I know as you authentically share, so many people are going to get to know you even more. So I really am excited to really open up new layers of conversation that potentially you never touched on. You're looking at the other side of this conversation. What do you see is on the other side of our talk today?
So definitely for me, my own healing, right? And I've said this to you. I said this to you in one of our sessions when we were working together. We heal in community. And we also heal when we share because our words are energy and energy is emotions. And so for me, it feels like that, like a big just emotional release. to have this the time and safe space to process like what actually happened. Because in true honestly, like I'm still processing it. It's been 2 years since I made that major decision, and there was so much that happened and so much movement. And, now that I'm at a point in my life where I can be still, there is still some processing to do. So I am still a little soft, and as I like to call it, like squishy in some spaces around it. But I know that we heal in community, we heal when we share. And so it's really important to me to do that.
It is so important, and I know anybody who's listening today who has experienced the life-altering decision of divorce, or even anyone who has experienced the disintegration of a spiritually significant relationship, anyone is able to hear your truth and see themselves. So, be soft, be squishy, and really share at your comfort level. I wanna really begin the conversation looking at the whole picture and looking at not just the divorce, but the marriage itself. I feel like we can't look at a divorce without looking at the marriage and the meaning and significance of the relationship. So when you go back to being 21 years old and deciding to get married at that time in your life, what did that marriage represent for you?
Yeah. So that decision and that marriage, when I really reflect back on it, was a decision made when I was living with my head. So it seemed like a smart decision, and it seemed like the thing to do, right? Following the safe path. I chose to do it a little bit earlier than some of my peers, but I mean, that's kind of the script, right? You have the good job, you live in the city, you find the person, you get married. I was just following the script based on what was shown to me and what society was saying this is what you do.
Yeah. I think you grew up very quickly. And so at 21 years old, you already had experienced so much of life's hardest challenges. And so to be 21 years old and actually understand the significance of time because of some of those life-changing moments that you experienced early on, I think it makes perfect sense that you were at the age of 21 already looking to move through the script that so many people would probably take another decade to move through. Were there any moments in your early childhood that you feel influenced your decision to get married young?
What's really, really interesting is as a child, I never had the dream of getting married. I never had the dream of a fairy tale wedding. That just wasn't something that I thought about as a child. Truly, when I was a little girl, what I thought about was starting an organization to help people like me, and what I was feeling in that moment with losing my mom and all the chaos that was happening around me, like, and doing that on my own and paving my own path. Like, marriage was not at all anything that I thought was going to be something that I was going to do when I was a child.
Wow. So it almost came as a surprise being really 21 in the city, meeting someone. How did you know that that person would be the person that you wanted to, at that time, spend your life with?
Yeah, I think, speaking really honestly, I had this illusion that if I got everything right materially, right? Like, when I say materially, like, I mean, if I got the money right, if I got the, perfect on paper partner right, if I got just things right, that it would fix me. Um, because I'm going to just be really honest, was so emotionally broken. And so I was seeking so much stuff outside of me to fix me, or to like feel like I was fixed. So I thought like, "Oh, you know, this seems like the smart thing to do, right? Like, entering into a marriage, it seems like we have the same, goals. I'm growing in some ways." And so it just, as I said, it was a head decision that was coming from the things outside of me must be able to fix me, right? But obviously, as we know, that's not true.
It was very much coming from this, I think, quest for wholeness. And perhaps at the time you didn't understand that it could have been a codependency, but it is evident to me that your higher self was clear that wholeness was something that you really cared to create in your life. I'm curious if you know the concept of pre-birth planning.
I don't. What is that?
It's it's the notion that we plan our life's challenges before birth, and all of it is in the name of love and in the name of growth, not just for ourselves, but our soul group. So you can look at the soul group, potentially the people who are in your intimate family. It could also be the people who you decide to have significant relationships with. So I'm curious if this relationship were a part of your pre-birth plan, how would you say it impacted your soul's evolution?
Yes. Okay. I've never heard it presented that way, but I'm familiar with it in the terms of tikkun from Kabbalah. So I know exactly what you're talking about. um, so it's really interesting because I have actually had conversations around this, especially during the time that the separation was happening. And the relationship between me and my ex husband was very karmic. There were things being corrected. And like to say this in a way that there had been an imbalance of power in many of our lifetimes together, mainly me being the one whose power was being taken for their gain. That's essentially the gist of the story. And so the work really in this life was to, as I call it, step away from that karmic pattern, from that agreement in a way that truly was in integrity with both parties. Because to not get too deep into it, the way that the relationship had ended in the lifetimes that we've had together wasn't necessarily of integrity or of the most like balanced way, I would say, you know?
Wow. It's it's really profound to be able to be such an observer to realize, okay, the meaning of the relationship, not to villainize, not to use words like good or bad, positive or negative, but when we actually look at karma, karma is all about balance. And to think about the flip where you were able to restore your internal balance, a moment saying, I'm no longer going to be in this dynamic, but I really want to break this soul agreement. I really want to rewrite the life script. That happened a few years ago. I remember it very profoundly. It was back in 2021. And you were so raw. And I just remember how you were clear and you knew exactly the next step, but you were so raw. So if you could bring us back to the moment where you recognized that you were no longer going to be in that dynamic, but you were ready to create a life you love. Tell us the picture of that scene when you decided that it was time to divorce.
Yes. As you can see, my eyes are getting watery because this is still an emotional point of time. I I just remember returning back home from Mexico and realizing that I had seen the truth. I had seen what was available to me if I decided to make a decision for me. And as you just touched on, it was really raw. It was really painful because it was realizing that the decision I needed to make was not only going to impact me, it was going to impact another person. It was going to impact, immediate families. And it was really going to turn everyone's life upside down as they knew it, right? Like, I think I remember the conversation when we were still in the midst of like separating or not staying together, things like that. and we were walking talking about, like, a Christmas vacation, and he had said to me, like, "I don't think we're actually going on Christmas vacation this year together."
Wow.
And yeah, and I think that for me, it was really like, it's painful to know that sometimes the best decision that you have to make for yourself does hurt another person. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's it's really, I think, so hard to do things that could potentially hurt someone and do things that could potentially, I think, cut off opportunities that you deeply care about. And in that moment, that grief and that knowingness that, okay, you had a better life on the other side, what what allowed you to be able to move forward in that moment, even holding all of the weight of that obviously was just your empathy for him and also your recognition of the changes that would be happening with your life.
Yeah, whenever I think about this, it really was just this it was just this, like, basically kind of knowing in my heart, like, knowing in my gut that, like, I have to do this. Like, there is no trying to make it work anymore. There is no going back. Like, you know what is for you, and if you deny that to yourself, you're gonna be miserable, and you're going to continue putting yourself through suffering that you don't have to.
Yeah. Getting to that moment where the suffering of the past is no longer possible to sustain and like you deeply know it. I'm curious if you received any spiritual messages or guidance, or was there anything significant that happened that really guided you?
Yeah, so in thinking about this, so there was this trail, it's called where I lived at the time in Orange County, Back Bay, and I used to wake up really early, like 6:30 in the morning, and I would just go and I would sit on a rock and I would just be with nature. And I remember during that time, so many hummingbirds would come and I would watch them and they would come super close and I would spend time with them. And then all of a sudden, like honeybees would start landing. And I used to be terrified of bees. Like, you have no idea. And so it was like me, knowing that I'm making this super honestly, it's a big decision to decide to get a divorce. It has so many impacts and not only emotionally, right? But physically, it really changes your entire world. And it was like I was being supported by these like little messengers of nature. Yeah.
That I love how the symbols have evolved over the years because there's been the hummingbird, the bees, the butterflies. So, yeah, I think it's amazing just to pay attention to the signs. I want to start moving into the part of the conversation where we talk about not the decision, but rather the evolution. The healing process really begins once the decision is made. And there's so much grief, there's so much nonlinearity to the process of healing. Before I enter into this part, I want to just highlight something because the way you're showing up right now and how raw you are, and also how clear you are, you prepared for this conversation. And one of the ways that you prepared was through a playlist. So I'm curious if there were any songs on the playlist that really allowed for you to return to the moment and connect to the memories.
Yes. So, Water Under the Bridge by Adele was definitely a song that I listened to a lot. Rhiannon definitely was a song that played a really big role. And I think Unconditionally, right? Like during that time, like the original playlist were songs that really like spoke to me as well as She Sets the City on Fire, right? Like there was like so many of those like from the past playlist. But when I think about life now and the one that I was listening to, I think the first song, Home, um, obviously we can link these songs to share. And then also the last one of Home and Price Tag. Um, that one was really speaking to me. Yeah. It was really interesting to just see how it's changed. And I think, you know, the song Fix You by Coldplay when I was listening to it just really kind of made me realize that I'm finally at a point where, in that song, like I feel like they're talking about fixing someone else, right? But it made me realize that like, at this point in my life, it really is just about not even fixing myself, just healing myself and really being focused on my own journey.
Yeah. I know that people appreciate your depth, like, people really speak about how deep you are, but the thing about those songs is we see the range. It's not just about the depth, but your emotional range, I think, is the byproduct of how much space you've held for your healing. You really know the contrast, and it took time. It definitely is still an ongoing process. Walk me through some of the steps you took to consciously heal. Once you decided and the decision was made, what were some of the steps that you can really recall that were a part of the healing journey?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously sought out mentorship and support. I think that's something that I just want everyone to know. As someone who did experience a lot of complex childhood trauma and still struggles with asking for support, hiring support to help me go through this, or even just asking friends who knew what I was going through, really like at the raw level and being like, "Hi, can I call you? I really just need some support through this," was like a number one thing. I worked with Lana a lot to heal my inner child. That was like the beginning stages of healing my inner child. Like I guess that was kind of like getting my feet wet when I worked with Lana. And then I think really just, I started going through my trauma informed program. And the first 4 months of that was actually healing you. It wasn't about other people. And that was really when I was able to deepen into connecting with my inner child and really just seeing all the hurt and all of the fears that were causing me to show up in relationships that were really rooted in codependency or manipulation, right? Um, and that's its own process and its own pill to swallow. And then I started studying the gene keys actually the past 6 months. And I started to understand why for me, like the deep emotional work, the shadow work, it shows up in relationships. So actually relationships are like my portal for some of the deepest work that I can do healing wise. And now like being in partnership and being in that experience again and just seeing some of the same patterns resurface and it's kind of like things are obviously different, but there's a level of work that you have to do to really create a different relationship. And I think first things first is you have to understand your own patterns. And for me, based on like my gene keys, like my sphere, it's all about not forgetting like what is important to me because I have had a tendency in the past to lose myself in relationships, to lose myself in their idea of what they want, and to not really stay focused on what's important to me. So I actually literally on my like in my office sticky note I look at every day, like don't forget what is important to you. And that's really what is, I would say, like the most profound part of this journey now is while it is beautiful to have, partnership and be in a relationship, it's it's about not forgetting what is important to you. And I feel like society right now is showing us this model of like, you're my person and like we're like sandwiched together and we have to do all these things. And it's just like there's so much enmeshment, codependency. And for me, it's been learning like when we can find the balance of I'm walking my path and you're walking yours, and we have our moments where we kind of go in and out, like that interdependence, it is possible, but it takes a lot of work. A lot of work with both parties. Yeah.
As you just spoke about the journey of just holding space for yourself and just focusing on you outside of relationship and really went into that process, it sounds like there were a lot of years where you didn't prioritize what was important to you. And so much of the grief is potentially lost opportunities or lost years or lost moments where you could have really taken care of your inner child. And as you were talking about that, I couldn't help but think about this concept of descansos. And I don't know if you know descansos, but I can talk about it more if you don't.
I don't know about it. What is it?
So in the Southwest, you will see on the side of roads crosses, and they're demarcations of unexpected deaths. And you can think about these mourning sites as points in your own life journey where there was an unexpected loss or potentially a missed experience or potentially even the little daily routines that you can no longer have or the relationships that no longer are supportive of your highest good. So if you think about the specific moments in your journey and those moments or resting places where you wanted to pause and hold space for, what specific memories come up?
Yeah, as you say it like that, I feel really like I am this individual who came here to like die and be reborn a lot of times. And I know that when we talk about death, like everyone always thinks about it so physically, right? But it's not that. Especially through being able to experience like temazcal here in Mexico, it's a traditional like sweat lodge ceremony. The whole idea is we go inside and it's dark and you can't see and it's super hot and you're being held in the mother's womb, but the whole significance of this is to die and be reborn again. And so when I think about like the catalyst moments of my life so far, and to be honest, like I'm young, I'm only 26, I'll be 27 in December. I always have to remind myself of that. But I really feel it all started with, my mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 5. World changed. And then it was going through that journey of slowly seeing someone fight so hard to stay alive, but it just wasn't going to happen. And to see someone go through that, you're not the same. And then she passed away. My mom died when I was around 8. I was about to turn 9. And, I mentioned this in something I wrote. Like, I think it was a week after, I don't know, it was a week that she died, or something happened. I just remember having ice cream for breakfast, and I realized that my life was never going to be the same, you know? Then my dad fell into his own like coping mechanisms using alcohol. And so then it was kind of really, I was on my own. And then my brother was just like, emotionally, my brother was 15, so it was just a very different experience for him. He had more time. I also just think we're all made differently, right? So his experience coping with that was to check out, to basically pull away from, me and my father. Also, my father was in his own pain. He was in his own coping mechanism. And then there I was at home by myself. And I think like there was that period. And then I realized when I was on the brink of teenager wise, like I had so much rage and anger and pain, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I started partying because that's what, I was already I was more mature for my age, right? I didn't have parents supervising me all the time. And then, I got really into that. And it's interesting how as reckless and as rebellious as I was being, there was always kind of a part of me that was on the course, right? Like I didn't flunk out of school, right? Like I did quite the opposite. I actually enrolled in college really early. I enrolled in college when I was 16. I got college credit, high school credit at the same time, and I just like excelled. I did really bad in high school because the environment was just not suited for me. I was being treated like an adult at home, so being in an environment where I was treated like a kid, So like that happened, right? And then yeah, I mean, I was still, I somehow got pulled back into that group of friends that were, partying, doing that thing. And then, subconsciously, I made a decision that had, ramifications where I was isolated from that group. And then I moved to San Francisco. And then, it was like a whole new playing field, right? Like it was a whole new opportunity to redefine who I was or who I was gonna be, what I was gonna do. And then, I always say this, like I'm not really a person who goes out looking to be in a relationship. I'm a person who kind of just minds my business and I want to like consciously I want to be alone. But now that I know what I know, like relationships are really like my learning ground. Like it's the best game for me to play to like learn and how to like deepen into myself. But I mean, even just thinking about like San Francisco and then getting married and then burning out, and then again, I decided to just leave. I was like, everything, like, this is not sustainable. I have to go. So then, I left. I went back to Washington, COVID hit, and then that was the whole more, I would say, like spiritual process of getting into yoga, becoming a certified yoga teacher, really tapping into understanding like what are the signs of life and how are they speaking to me and following that. And then that's what led me to IPAC. And then that's what, kicked off all of these things. So I would say, my entire life has just been a succession of events that require me to kind of die metaphorically